Hey, this is Notser, and this is a first look at the unreleased British battleship line. At Tier 3, we've got the BELLEROPHON, 10 305mm guns. It's got below average AA. It is a Tier 3 though. Armor-wise, it's a very soft outer layer with a very difficult to hit citadel. Plunging fire is the only way you will be able to do damage to the citadel. The speed listed is including the speed flag, so it's around 20-21 knots, very American as its base speed, and I highly recommend for the early tier British battleships you use speed flags or you're going to get so annoyed by their speed or lack thereof. But what's the package? What's the goal of the British battleships at this early stage? Get close to your target. Hopefully you're not close to any destroyers or cruisers that have torpedoes, and try and take advantage of the fact that you are basically immune to citadels while being close in proximity to your enemy. And you have a heal akin to the Warspite, not the Tier 9 or the Tier 10, the Warspite. So it heals a little bit more, but if you've ever played the Warspite, it takes a little bit more damage too. So it's a little give and take. You really have to make sure that you maintain good usage of your heal. You don't waste that cooldown because you're going to need it. You're just really fleshy. You've got a lot of softness that can easily take full damage from AP or HE. At Tier 4, we've got the Orion. It's 10 343mm gun, so it's a little upgunned. It's got, again, pretty below average AA protection. 23.1 knots, so it's very slow. This is the signal flag again case. It has a very familiar design. However, the top of the hull does get increased armor, so if you're aiming at this, you really want to go bow and stern with HE. Again, the citadel deep inside. You're going to hear that a lot, and hopefully you enjoy it. But it's pretty cool looking. I like the Orion. It feels very much like it's just a giant destroyer. You know how destroyers have that forward mounted bow and the armor's a little higher on the waterline at the front, and then it sort of like softens and flattens so they can have a lot of excess deck equipment that can be used to hunt down enemy destroyers. I really enjoy that design, and you have some of that on the Orion. From a build standpoint, it's very similar to the Tier 3. You've got the Warspite heal, which is appreciative. You take extra damage, though, from HE and AP in general, because there's not going to be as many all or nothing. It's going to be very much penetrate, penetrate, penetrate. Don't shatter, don't shatter, don't shatter. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm taking so much damage. You got to use your heal. There's no aircraft that is on this particular version, and the gun angles are actually very usable. This isn't Wyoming and New York levels of bad, where you have a very limited firing arc of the number 3 gun or the number 4 gun. It actually is very much enjoyable to use. We've got at Tier 5 the Iron Duke. It has the 343s that you got on the previous ship, a little bit more health, a little bit more AA protection, granted not that much. We've got the same sort of speed, 23.6 knots, so again I'm using the speed signal flag. This is with a concealed commander, so 12.5 is the best it could possibly be with the camo as well. Again, citadel deep inside, very fleshy bits on the outside, but basically immune to citadels. And that is really key to the way you want to play this ship. You do not want to stay near your max range all the time. You want to take advantage of the fact that, yes, I can be close, and I can't really take as much damage up front in a very, very offensive manner. Best example of this would be if you're coming around an island and you're going one-on-one against a battleship. You should have the advantage, unless, of course, you're going up against another British battleship where you could potentially get their citadel and they can't. And in that limited engagement window, it's going to be hard for them to stack up that extra damage output on you that you would normally take. A good example of when it feels like it's overwhelming, when you got 2, 3, 4 enemy ships firing on your ship, it's very hard to mitigate it. Everyone's going to go through this. I'm going to have more videos on it, but it just feels very difficult to run away from damage if you overextend, especially down here. Especially. And for them to qualify these guys as heavily armored, I mean, yes, technically they are more heavily armored layer-wise than the late tier British, but they're using the same sort of warspite heal, so they expect to take torpedo damage, flood damage, fire damage, chip damage, and they will take a lot of it, so you just need to be ready. And of course I was hunting down this enemy, Fubuki. Vigilance is definitely recommended for these ships. At tier 6, we've got the Queen Elizabeth. This has the 8 381mm setup that you are familiar with the warspite. Spoiler alert, the warspite is a Queen Elizabeth class. Health goes up, torpedo protection goes up, AA protection goes up compared to the warspite. The speed, basically around the warspite, I am taking advantage of the speed signal flag. Concealment, very average. Your turret traverse goes down though. This is probably the slowest mainline turret traverse. Before you put in any modules that slow down, you know, Yamato is notorious for being very slow to get the rate of fire boost. This is about 70 or 60 seconds base without expert marksman. Yeah, it's very noticeable how slow the turrets traverse. So what do you gain compared to the warspite? So we could just talk about the warspite versus the Queen Elizabeth. Warspite, it's got a small turn radius, it's got worse AA protection, it has basically the same rudder shift time, but it will make a tighter circle, obviously. The turrets traverse quicker, same caliber gun, same caliber accuracy, you're all familiar with that. Worse AA protection on the warspite. So the ideal scenario for the Queen would be that most of the enemy would try and use torpedoes in the form of aircraft, but even then you're very average with your AA protection. Nothing in line with the US at all. Nothing is coming close to the American aircraft protection. Nothing ever will, basically. So if you're used to that or you expect that as compensation for the slow turret traverse and the larger turn radius, you're not getting that. But 381 is 381, and you can do some great damage with the Queen, just like the warspite. Very fleshy. At tier 7, we've got King George V. This is an exciting ship for a lot of players because it's a ship that honestly is real, and a lot of the later ships are very fictional. It has 10 356mm guns, 2 quad-mounted turrets, which is very interesting. Accuracy's pretty good. AA protection's not very good. Speed is fantastic, 29.4, including the speed signal flag. 12.2 is with concealment on my commander, very good, honestly. This is the last tier before the concealment module, and the Citadel is deep inside the ship. So it's basically immune at close range. Take advantage of that. The 10 guns is pretty nice. The rate of fire is very nice. You want to sort of play this somewhat like a Scharnhorst. You want to be actively switching HE to AP. AP for those broadsides, battleships, cruisers. HE for basically the bow-on battleship, the bow-on cruiser that you honestly, some cruisers you're going up against, you won't be able to overmatch their front if you're bottom tier, so keep that in mind. But yeah, HE's very effective, AP's very effective. I've really enjoyed the variety that this has brought. And by the way, it's going to show up as ... if you're ever facing it right now in its pre-launch state. That is what it is. It's the King George. Just keep that in mind. People were kind of laughing. It's like, what the hell is Notser in? He's in a ... And I think that's because it was a tier 8 and then they declassified it and they didn't maybe get all of that done before it got out to the community contributors. They sort of moved the Nelson quickly to make it useful, and you know, that's just the way it works. And it's still a really fun tier 7. This is the first fast, good concealment ship that Wargaming has classified. And that's about where it is. However, torpedo protection's pretty poor. Not that it would matter against 10 of them if they were to hit, just barely. At tier 8, we've got the Monarch. This is basically the King George with 381mm guns. So instead of 10 356, we've got 9 381. AA is very average. Speed is not. Again, 29.4. Basically the exact same armor layout. Basically the exact same concealment. However, now you can equip the concealment module, so it's 10.9. Yes, 10.9 on a battleship. The Citadel deep inside once again. 10.9 on a battleship. Is that a real number, Notser? That's a real number. It has better concealment at tier 8 than most cruisers. Oh man, what am I going to say about this? You are a super heavy cruiser. You are a stealth assassin. You want to fire at a perfectly broadside target. You want to take them down. And you want to actively switch between HE and AP. You are at tier 8 now. 381 is starting to look pretty long in the teeth. You've got to go up against 32mm bows. You have 32mm bows. Your tier 7 version, the King George, had 25mm bows. So they at least up-armored the locations of the ship that matter. But again, the British, very fleshy. They have a very soft outer layer and very hard to get deep into the Citadel. So they just take a lot of damage, just like the Warspite. And so far, we have used the Warspite style heal. Expect to take lots of damage, but be that stealth assassin that so many high concealment battleships can be. It's just perfect for me. I love the American style, especially the high tier. Fast speed, great concealment, and the guns can get there accurately, and I just enjoy it. I love it. I can't wait for more. At tier 9, we've got the Lion. Now, the Lion is interesting because its health pool is honestly garbage. 67,000 is equivalent to a tier 7 premium. It's got 9 419mm guns, very average AA protection, super fast ship, 31 knots with the speed flag, great concealment, 11.5, best in class at its tier, and the Citadel once again is deep inside. Fleshy outer layer, very difficult to Citadel at close to medium range. Only plunging fire will be effective at Citadeling any of the mainline British battleships. So what's the deal with that health, Notser? Well, the Lion is the first British battleship to get access to that super heal that you've been hearing so much about. What's the super heal, Notser? It will give you a return that is probably 3 times equivalent to what the Warspite heal would normally give. So the heal per second on the Lion, I believe, is something like 17 or 1800 per second. The German battleship, which is the closest, is around 600 per second. So about 3 times better. That's a big deal. For and against. For, obviously, the potential. I'm going to be getting tons of heal. You do sacrifice 1 charge of your health. I really recommend you have to use premium on this, and I absolutely recommend getting Superintendent to shore up that, because yeah, it's nice to have a super heal, but only have 2 or 3 charges. That's pretty bad. And plus, the non-premium takes longer to recharge. You need this up to really protect yourself. If you're going up against it, just envision them healing for about 20,000 with whatever health pool you see. And then understand that they're going to be on cooldown. So just like damage control, you want to take advantage of the cooldown window that every single Lion and every single Conqueror is going to have to deal with. And speaking of the Conqueror, we've got it at tier 10. 82,000 health, again, very small. 30% torpedo protection, almost the worst. Only the Grosse Kua First has worse by 3%. It has the ability to equip 12 419mm guns or 8 457mm guns. The AA is average, speed 31 knots with the speed signal flag. 11.1, yes, 11.1 is the concealment of the ship. It beats out the Montana, which has the second best, by 2.3 kilometers. That's ridiculous. I just have to envision there's going to be something that sits in between the Montana and the Conqueror. It makes no other sense to me. So I'm predicting that the French are going to be that concealed as well. So let's talk about, obviously the heal is really good. You don't have as many charges, so you want to compensate by getting Superintendent and Premium. You don't have access to an aircraft at all, so you're a little vulnerable to torpedoes and enemies that might ambush you behind islands with torpedoes. So I highly recommend picking up Vigilance as well. So basically your level 3s are chosen for you. You really don't have any wiggle room. Those are the only ones that are really viable to make sure that you are as strong as you possibly could be. The gun systems are very interesting. They have the same rate of fire, 419 and the 457. The difference is the amount of guns. You take away 1 gun per gun turret to equip the 457. and it is very noticeable to have 8 guns versus the 12 of the 419. I think the 419s are very good. They are absolutely outperforming the 457s. I expect them to do something in that balance regard. Either make the 457s have a better rate of fire, or maybe handle a little bit better. But for now, 419 will be the de facto loadout for this. I'm gonna guarantee that. 457 just is very... 8 guns just feels inaccurate. 12 guns feels very accurate. It's very weird how that works out. They have the same accuracy, just you have less chance for it to go where you want it to go each salvo. Overall, the Conqueror can be very effective if allowed to do what it wants to do. Drop off detection, disengage, do the max heal, and do it all over again. If you stay on its ass with torpedoes, keep it spotted, have focus fire, it will crumble very quickly because it just doesn't have the health pool of the other battleships. Whereas they mitigate it through just improved protection from torpedoes, armor, whatever. The mitigation for Conqueror and for the line is to use the heal on cooldown and to get back 20,000. That's the mitigation. It's still going to take a ton of damage. And for anyone who's farming damage, you might actually be excited to shoot at these guys. We'll have to see if they hold true. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.